For some of you new marketers, you might be like, ZMOT, what the hell is that? Well, ZMOT is actually a term that was, at least in my memory, coined by the folks at Google, their research arm, Think with Google, and ZMOT stands for Zero Moment of Truth. Hey everyone, welcome to my show. My name is Yoli Chisholm, and this is a show where I sometimes talk about marketing in the past, take a trip down memory lane, and also look into the future, talk about some tools and tactics that I'm obsessed with or testing and experimenting, and everything in between. I love marketing, so let's get into it. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today is, um, do you remember the very first time you were aware of this transition into the customer having control? You know, we tend to talk about it as if it's a new phenomenon, but it's at least, the earliest I remember talking about customer centricity has always been, really, as long as I've been a marketer. But a lot of times it's been lip service. But the earliest memory of talking about the customer having control was actually in around 2011. And this big tech company hired me, and they said to me, I want you to figure out ZMOT and figure out what ZMOT means for our business. What do we need to change because of ZMOT? For some of you new marketers, you might be like, ZMOT, what the hell is that? Well, ZMOT is actually a term that was, at least in my memory, coined by the folks at Google, their research arm, Think with Google, and ZMOT stands for Zero Moment of Truth. And around 2011, they wrote this ebook around this notion of ZMOT. And for a moment, let's just talk about how brilliant that was in terms of just naming a new sort of change in behavior in order to sort of draw attention to it. And what Google brilliantly encapsulated in ZMOT was that brands would have to change how they go to market to map the change in behavior that customers are going through. Now, I'm not telling you anything new. Any B2B company today typically starts their pitch deck with, the customer is control. But I wanted to just give you, to sort of tell you my story of ZMOT. So I got hired as an individual contributor and my title was something ZMOT innovation. And I was put in an innovation team that was actually focused on a new marketing tech in a number of areas. So I had peers who were focused on trying to understand social selling and what that means for their org, for the company as a whole, and ended up making huge inroads in that discipline. I had peers who were focused on social media management and really understanding what was happening in social and enabling marketers and accelerating the learning for marketers in that space. And one of the areas that I dove into was ZMOT and what it meant for our advertising and how we went to market in advertising. And so I'm going to take you through a number of areas that for you seasoned marketers might be no-brainers. Before the folks who might be new to marketing in my audience, and I'm hoping there's quite a few of you, just here are some things that you might be of value to you that I took away from my time around 2011 in parsing what Google was trying to say about the zero moment of truth. So the zero moment of truth is that moment when the buyer is in the process and in the mindset to purchase a product in your category. And because the way they navigate through the buyer's journey has changed, you have to think about how you show up in each touch point in the buyer's journey. And so I had to think about, what did that mean for advertising? So for this particular org that I was working at, one of the big insights that we got was just around the need to switch our mindset from buying advertising on specific publishers to actually doing programmatic buying. Because the touch points had become so many, right? And there wasn't just one journey for each prospect. It ended up being necessary to kind of make the switch from what most traditional digital marketers had been doing with their budgets, big budgets, was allocating spend to specific publishers. Instead, one of the biggest changes we made right away was moving to programmatic. And along with programmatic, as we continue to refine and learn and understand how to use programmatic effectively, one of the other changes we made was moving from sort of campaigns that sort of have stop starts to campaigns that can run evergreen. And the reason why this is key is because the algorithms, the AI that drives the programmatic targeting and all of the factors around performance learn over time and learn you see a reduction in your CPAs the longer the campaign is in market. And so instead of having stop-start campaigns, which basically reset your CPA, we switched to running campaigns evergreen. So the two insights there was we switched from buying ads on specific publishers because we had to broaden the journey and essentially follow the prospect as they navigate the web. And the second insight was moving from campaigns that stop and start, which essentially reset the CPA, to campaigns that can run evergreen. And essentially, you might start with a CPA that's at like $200 if you're in the B2B market at the beginning of the year, and you might actually be able to get that down to about $13, which is, I'm just giving you a scenario that we have, a real case scenario that we had in this particular business. So those were two insights. So the other thing we learned was that it was no longer just about the lowest CPA. If you think about your marketing mix, you might be running programmatic, you might be doing social ads, you might be doing sponsored content or native advertising on channels like Outbrain and Taboola. And typically at the time, what marketers would typically do is, if you're optimizing your campaigns week to week or month to month, you might look at what is the lowest cost channel that's driving whatever action you're trying to drive, and you would reinvest in those lowest cost channels, and then you would divest out of the channels that have a higher CPA. And with some experimenting and some testing, what we found was that it's not really about the lowest cost CPA, because the buyer's journey has changed, and because there are numerous touch points in the buyer's journey and you're following them all over the web, it's really about the assists and the handoffs from one channel to another. And that, in fact, there have been a ton of studies around the number of times a prospect needs to see your ad offer native content before they take an action. It can be as many as 12 times. And so if you are optimizing out of other channels simply because they have a higher CPA, you actually might be impacting your performance. That in fact, it's about doing integrated marketing. It's about surrounding the prospect with your marketing across multiple channels. And so your marketing mix actually needs to be quite rich. And how you optimize the CPA ends up being in your targeting. And in the B2B space, fortunately, if you know what you're doing, you already know who you're going after. You know the organizations. And so it's not so much scale play. It actually becomes more about account-based marketing, about more smarter targeting, leveraging first-party, third-party data, etc. And we'll kind of get to that. That's actually a good transition to my next point. So to summarize, in that point, it's no longer about CPA. It's really about integrated marketing, and it's really about assists. Of course, that brings up all other problems around attribution. But I have chosen to, evolve with the industry as the industry sort of learns more about attribution. But it's not so much a constant, consistent focus. All right. The other point that we learned was really your website. When you think about ZMOT, and I encourage you all to watch the video and the ebook that came out about ZMOT, even though it's over 9 years old at this point. Your website is no longer the first or the last stop in the buyer's journey. Okay? And because of that, that means that your website and the content you display there needs to change. The approach, because if you think about, if you think that your website is the first stop, you probably design your site a specific way. If you think your website is the last stop, then you probably know that the prospect has done a ton of research before they get to you. And so top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, personalization, all those disciplines started to bubble up because of this change in behavior and the notions around ZMOT. And so for us, it was really about how do we rethink the website. And one of the things obviously that came out of that was using retargeting. If it's not the last stop, then let's just at least make sure that we are cooking folks that land at the site, and then we can have programmatic takeover and surround them around the web. And I actually think retargeting, because of the longer sales cycles, is actually more beneficial for B2B marketers. But I'm biased because I've been in that space longest. Okay, the other thing we learned was obviously, and as I alluded to earlier, first and third party data, right? Like we found that because the buyer's journey was so disparate, we needed to have a ton more data. And because we were using programmatic, we were actually accumulating a lot more data. And because the prospect was visiting our website several times and doing different things, we were accumulating a ton of data because they were leveraging multiple sites that were now making their data available. There was the need to have access to that third-party data. And combining the first-party and third-party data became possible through the use of DMPs. And that leads me to my next point. So it's in the same period that I actually made the decision to bring advertising in-house because of the need to have a lot more control in terms of how we leverage the data for much smarter targeting, how quickly we wanted to optimize and execute campaigns, how quickly we wanted to be able to scale creative development and the versions of creative that needed to be developed. It became much easier when we had all of those resources in-house. So went a little bit rogue and brought advertising in-house, and that was really cool, a really cool experience to learn how to build an ad agency in-house and bring those skills and capabilities in-house. But it was really fueled by the desire to have greater control of our data and optimize our campaigns in a much more accelerated pace. Um, what's the last point? So the last point I can share was, and for most of you sort of more senior marketers, you'll be familiar with this notion of above the line advertising and below the line advertising. For some of you newer marketers, you might have it referred to as sort of your brand awareness marketing versus your direct response marketing. And in a lot of organizations, those might actually be two very different teams that do campaigns in siloed landing pages, etc. And one of the insights that we learned during this period, to some sort of varied degree of success, was that those teams needed to collaborate more. Because if you imagine there's a big investment in brand awareness campaigns that are being driven to a specific landing page, you should at least be pixeling those pages so that you can build cookie pools so that the direct response team can leverage those cookie pools. And then if they're doing marketing automation, they can kind of have a handoff and continue to nurture. And so it became a lot more necessary to sort of have cross-team collaboration between those teams. And actually, if you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you get to, build a marketing organization from scratch, I would encourage you not to have those as separate teams, or at least foster a lot greater collaboration. But if you are in a, established large organization, there's a ton of opportunity. If you are not making sure that the direct response team leverages the data that is being driven by the brand awareness team, you're missing out on a huge, huge, huge opportunity. So let me summarize. So there were like 6 or 7 insights that came out of ZMOT and looking into the zero moment of truth. And really what I have translated that into now as we do modern marketing, it's number one on my sort of pillar of marketing excellence. It's to win the buyer's journey. And so that's how I've translated ZMOT into the kind of marketing I'm doing today. Is you've got to win the buyer's journey. And that means you need to know the touch points in the buyer's journey for your business. So, if you are buying ads on specific publishers and you're not leveraging programmatic, there's a ton of challenges, obviously, that we've learned over the years with programmatic. But if you execute it well, you can broaden the frequency and the scope of how your prospect encounters your messaging beyond just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, even 10 publishers to a lot more publishers, because the buyer's journey is a lot more broader. And so you want to leverage programmatic in a smart way. You want to run campaigns year round versus evergreen. AI is in everything, but AI needs to learn. Okay, so if you're starting campaigns, you might think a channel isn't effective, but it might not be because the channel isn't effective. It might be because you're not running the campaigns long enough. And before you start to run campaigns on certain channels, you need to make sure you've got enough budget, or you're much more strategic with the how you allocate your budget over time, so that you can accelerate the learning up front and run the campaigns for a longer period of time. It gets more sophisticated the more data you have, obviously. But forget the stop and start campaigns. Run campaigns longer if it's within your power to do so. The other insight was really no longer about lower cost CPAs, all about the assists, all about the frequency of your message. You need to be getting your message in front of a prospect over 12 times, okay? That means multiple channels. That's integrated marketing, okay? So if you have a senior leader who comes to you and just says, We want you to do LinkedIn marketing. um, that's one channel. Okay. Think about how frequently you go to, whatever publisher it is. And I just picked on LinkedIn. We love LinkedIn. LinkedIn's one of my biggest partners. But it could be XYZ um, publisher. You want to make sure that folks understand that what's more effective is integrated marketing across multiple channels. Um, then the fourth was your website is no longer just your first or the last stop for your prospect. So how do you change the design of the website with that in mind? And what are you doing to make sure that if they do visit your website, that you capture enough data to optimize their experience while they're on your website and while they're elsewhere, navigating across the web. The fifth point was really leveraging first and third party data. Most of you are already doing that. Hopefully you are leveraging things like custom audiences, using a sophisticated DMP. And if you are so lucky to have the opportunity to sometimes have some aspect of your media buying brought in-house, that can be cool and fun. Now, I've worked for organizations that have had both, and just leverage it for specific campaigns, working with an agency, because agencies have a lot of value in terms of driving scale play. And then you might also have an aspect of your business where your advertising is in-house. And then above the line, below the line, blurring those lines, cross-team collaboration, really trying to drive the mix and balance between brand awareness and your direct response marketing. So it was a fun time diving into ZMOT, and diving into ZMOT actually helped us as marketers really refine and improve our skill set, because the buyer had changed, buying behavior had changed, and because of that, we had to change as marketers. So thanks for taking that trip down memory lane with me, and I'd encourage you to look into ZMOT. And just a side note, if you are in a business where you might need to drive a change in behavior, you know, coming up with a name for it is a great marketing tactic. Really, really smart. One of my favorite B2B brands, Drift, with their conversational marketing, another really brilliant way of calling attention to either a new discipline or a new category. And for me, so ZMOT was a good way to kind of encapsulate that the customer had control and that brands needed to think about what they were going to do to change to optimize their go-to-market strategy. Until next time, make sure that you are following me on all your preferred social media channels. Hit the subscribe button if you're watching me on YouTube. Click the notification button, and I will see you soon. Thanks. What you waiting for? I see you standing